Hi, I'm Selene, and at my father's company grand opening, my name tag didn't just have my name, it labeled me as the family's burden. I stood there, surrounded by champagne glasses and forced smiles, while my family laughed at my expense. But that was just the beginning, because behind the wealth and prestige, behind the Moreau name, were lies, the kind that erased my mother, the kind that stole everything from me. And when I finally uncovered the truth, they didn't just try to silence me, they tried to destroy me. But here's the thing about people who think they can control you forever. They never expect you to fight back. I never wanted to come. When the invitation arrived, gilded edges, embossed lettering, an ostentatious display of Moreau wealth, I had every intention of throwing it in the trash. But then Isolde called. "Just show up, Solène," she had urged. "Let them see you're still standing." So here I was, standing outside Moreau Industries' grand new headquarters, staring at the towering glass facade that reflected Chicago's city lights like a beacon of power and privilege. My family's empire, a kingdom built on control, appearances, and a legacy that had no place for me. I exhaled, adjusting the sleek black dress I had chosen. Not too bold, not too understated, a balance of defiance and restraint. If I was going to walk into the lion's den, I would do it on my terms. Stepping inside, I was immediately swallowed by the opulence. Crystal chandeliers bathed the room in a golden glow, the scent of expensive cologne and champagne filling the air. Conversations hummed, business deals, strategic alliances, power plays disguised as pleasantries. The Moreau way. And there he was, Magnus Moreau, my father. Surrounded by Chicago's elite, he laughed at something an investor said, his presence commanding yet effortlessly detached. He hadn't noticed me yet. Or maybe he had, and chose to pretend otherwise. Across the room, Vespera stood with Celine, the two of them an image of polished perfection. They were already watching me, their expressions unreadable, but their amusement palpable. I knew this wasn't a welcome. This was a spectacle. I squared my shoulders and walked in. I made it halfway across the ballroom before I saw it. A small, elegant table near the entrance, neatly arranged with name tags for the guests. An old trick of Vespera's. Networking, she called it. Control, I knew better. I skimmed the names absently at first. Magnus Moreau, CEO, Vespera Moreau, Moreau Charitable Foundation, Lucien Moreau, future successor, Celine Moreau, social icon. Then I saw mine, Solène Moreau, the family's burden. My breath caught, my fingers tightening instinctively. At first, I thought it was a mistake, some cruel joke. But then I heard it. Celine's laugh. I turned, and there she was, a flute of champagne in hand, eyes glinting with amusement. "Come on, Soli," she drawled, raising her glass. "Don't tell me you're offended by a little joke?" Vespera was beside her, ever the composed orchestrator of social cruelty. She tilted her head, her voice smooth as silk. "Networking events should be fun, dear. Don't take things so personally." A slow heat rose in my chest, but I refused to let it show. Not here, not now. I glanced around. Several guests had noticed, discreetly stealing glances in my direction. No one spoke, no one intervened. Because this was how it always was. A small, calculated humiliation, just subtle enough that if I reacted, I would look like the problem. I should have seen it coming. I inhaled slowly, fingers loosening around the name tag. My pulse thrummed in my ears, but I willed my expression into something unreadable. If they expected a scene, I wouldn't give them one. Instead, I smoothed the tag out, aligning it perfectly with the others on the table. Then, I picked up a glass of champagne from a passing server, turned toward the room, and smiled. If they wanted a show, I would give them one. The chatter around me buzzed, but my mind was elsewhere, locked on the name tag, the smirk on Celine's face, and the buried memories that had just resurfaced. I moved through the room like a ghost, present yet detached. Every polite smile, every murmured toast, every carefully curated exchange. It was all part of the act. This was a stage, and I was the only one who refused to play the role assigned to me. I needed air. Stepping toward the back of the venue, I let the cool evening breeze from the balcony wash over me. I should have left the moment I saw that name tag, but something held me here, something deeper than pride or defiance. Then I heard it. Strange how your mother just disappeared from the picture, isn't it? I froze. A man's voice, low but deliberate, carried over from a small circle of investors near the bar. He swirled his whiskey, his words casual, but they hit me like a punch to the gut. Magnus chuckled, his tone measured. Life takes people in different directions. The investor smirked. Right, and yet some disappear more thoroughly than others. Magnus's smile didn't falter, but something flickered in his eyes. A warning. The conversation shifted. Laughter filled the space, but I barely heard it. I turned, my pulse quickening. Was my mother forced out? Was her absence not voluntary? Across the room, I caught sight of Isolde. She wasn't watching the investors. She was watching Magnus and Vespera, and the look in her eyes told me she knew something. The weight in my chest grew heavier. I needed answers. Slipping away from the crowd, I wandered down the hall where the offices were. I knew this building well. Before I had become an inconvenience, Moreau Industries was supposed to be my future too. Magnus's office door was slightly ajar. That wasn't like him. He never left things unsecured. Something told me to step inside. The room smelled like leather and expensive scotch. Bookshelves lined the walls, and his massive mahogany desk sat in the center, an altar to his authority. Everything was in perfect order. Everything except a single drawer, slightly open. I hesitated. Then, with a steadying breath, I reached for it. Inside, a stack of neatly arranged documents. But it wasn't the business reports that caught my eye. It was the envelope tucked between them. Yellowed with time, edges worn. My name was on it. I pulled it out, my hands trembling. The handwriting was unmistakable, my mother's. Swallowing hard, I opened it. Solène, I tried to reach you, but they never let me. I hope one day you find this. The words blurred as my vision swam. I gripped the letter tighter, forcing myself to read on. She had written about the divorce, about how Magnus and Vespera controlled everything, even her ability to see me. How they had twisted the narrative, ensuring that when she was gone, she would never be able to return. How she had never wanted to leave me behind. My breath came in short, sharp bursts. I had spent years believing she had abandoned me, that she had walked away and never looked back. It was all a lie. A shadow fell over me. I turned sharply, heart pounding, only to find Isolde standing at the door. Her eyes flickered to the letter in my hands, and her expression softened. You found it, she said quietly. The walls felt like they were closing in. You knew? She hesitated. Not everything, but I had my suspicions. My stomach twisted. Rage, grief, betrayal, they all tangled together inside me. Why didn't you tell me? My voice was barely above a whisper. Isolde sighed. Because you weren't ready to hear it. She took a step closer, her voice low but firm. And because they expect you to lose control. If you lash out now, they win. Understand? I clenched my jaw. I did understand. But that didn't make it any easier. I carefully folded the letter, tucking it into my clutch. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. Straightening my dress, I squared my shoulders and stepped back into the party, now seeing every smiling face for what it truly was. A mask hiding decades of lies. The sound of champagne glasses clinking filled the air, but all I could hear was my mother's words echoing in my mind. They never let me reach you. I stood motionless in the ballroom, gripping my clutch tightly, my breathing measured. Around me, the event carried on, oblivious to the storm brewing inside me. Laughter, polite conversations, the occasional flash of a camera. Every bit of it felt staged, rehearsed, artificial. I had spent years wondering why my mother had disappeared from my life, why I had been left behind. Now I knew the truth. And Magnus Moreau was standing just a few feet away, completely at ease, basking in the admiration of his peers, as if he hadn't orchestrated the biggest betrayal of my life. Then he raised his glass. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, his voice commanding the room's attention. "Tonight, we celebrate not only a milestone for Moreau Industries, but the legacy that we continue to build for the future." A murmur of anticipation swept through the crowd. I felt my pulse quicken. I knew my father well enough to recognize when he was about to make a move. "Strength, innovation, and leadership," Magnus continued, "are the foundation of our success, and that is why, tonight, I am proud to make it official. Lucien Moreau will be my successor, and my legacy will be entrusted to him alone." The applause was deafening. I felt my stomach drop. Vespera was watching me, her lips curling into a small, satisfied smile. Selene barely contained her smirk as she whispered something to a guest beside her. They had been waiting for this moment. Magnus hadn't even looked at me. Not once. I was out. Publicly, undeniably, irreversibly cut off. I swallowed the lump rising in my throat and forced a slow, steady breath. I had known, deep down, that there was never a future for me in this family. But seeing it confirmed in front of an entire room of strangers made the sting sharper, the weight of rejection heavier. But I wouldn't break here. I picked up a glass from a passing server and took a sip, barely tasting the champagne. My hands were steady, my expression unreadable. If they wanted me humiliated, they would be disappointed. I turned and walked out. I wasn't thinking about where I was going, only that I needed to be away from the flashing lights, the whispers, the suffocating presence of Magnus and Vespera. My feet led me down the hallway, past the event staff, until I found myself in familiar territory. Magnus's office. I hesitated. Then I saw it. The drawer. The one I had left slightly ajar when I found my mother's letter. A rush of something, instinct, desperation, pushed me forward. If Magnus had hidden that letter, what else had he kept buried? I pulled the drawer open, rummaging through the neatly arranged files, financial statements, board meeting minutes, stock reports, until my fingers brushed against something that didn't belong. A separate folder, labeled Charitable Allocations, V. Moreau. I flipped it open, and what I found nearly made me gasp. Numbers, transfers, accounts. It took me seconds to realize what I was looking at. Undeniable proof that Moreau Industries had been laundering money through Vespera's so-called charity foundation. My entire body went cold. "Whatever you think you found," a voice drawled from the doorway, "it won't matter." I turned sharply, my heart pounding. Lucien leaned against the doorframe, his expression amused, but there was something in his eyes. A warning. I clutched the folder tighter. "Then you won't mind if I take a closer look, will you?" His smirk didn't waver. "Careful, Solane. You might not like what you find." I held his gaze, refusing to let him see any hint of doubt. "Neither will you." His jaw tightened for the briefest moment before he pushed off the doorframe. "You've already lost. You just don't know it yet." I exhaled slowly as he walked away. I didn't believe him, not anymore. For years, I had been the outsider in this family, the inconvenience, the burden. But as I stared down at the incriminating documents in my hands, I realized something. I wasn't just a burden anymore. I was a threat. I inhaled sharply, glancing at Isolde. If they were willing to lie to me about my own mother, how far would they go to protect their empire? The answer came the next morning. I woke up to my phone vibrating incessantly on my nightstand. The sharp, relentless buzz filled the silence of my apartment. My stomach twisted as I reached for it, already knowing they had made their move. The first thing I saw was my name. Everywhere. Moreau Heiress Spirals. A jealous daughter's attempt to sabotage her father's success. Entitled and bitter, Solane Moreau tries to stir family drama at gala. A distorted, carefully edited video clip from the event was attached to most of the articles. It showed me at the name tag table, gripping the humiliating label, my jaw tight. Then, a selective cut of me walking away from Magnus's speech, a moment that now looked like a petulant act of defiance rather than self-preservation. I scrolled further, my pulse pounding in my ears. Then I saw her. Vespera, elegantly poised in a pre-recorded interview, her voice coated with false sympathy. We only ever wanted the best for Selene, but she refuses to be part of this family. This has been difficult for all of us. My stomach twisted as the video cut to Selena, shaking her head in feigned disappointment. We tried. We really did. And then Lucian, looking effortlessly composed. It's sad to see someone spiral like this, but some people just don't know how to move forward. I clenched my jaw so tightly it ached. They hadn't just disowned me. They were rewriting the story. And people were eating it up. The first call I answered was from Isolde. "Selene," she said, her voice clipped. "Turn on the TV." I had already seen enough online, but I grabbed the remote anyway. A news anchor was mid-sentence, my name scrolling in bold beneath her. Sources close to the Moreau family say Selene has struggled with her place in the family for years. Some speculate that financial motivations could be behind her recent behavior. My chest tightened. Financial motivations. "Isolde," I whispered. "What are they doing?" "They're making sure you have nothing left," she said, voice urgent. "This isn't just about reputation, Selene. It's about isolation. They've already started freezing accounts linked to your name, citing irregularities to justify it. And your industry contacts? They're pulling away. You're being blacklisted." I swallowed hard, pressing a hand to my temple. "Magnus and Vespera aren't just trying to ruin your name," she continued. "They're making sure you have nowhere to turn, and they won't stop here." A cold sense of dread settled in my gut. I had spent years trying to be indifferent to their cruelty, but this wasn't just cruelty anymore. This was war. I stared at my reflection in the dark screen of my laptop. For years, I had let them define me. I had let them make me small, insignificant, but they had underestimated me. I wasn't the same person I had been before. I wouldn't let them destroy me. I wouldn't just survive this. I would win. I reached for my phone and dialed Isolde. She answered on the first ring. "If they want to fight," I said, voice steady, "I'll give them one." I closed my laptop, my heart steady for the first time in years. It was time to show them exactly what a burden could do. I scrolled through the endless stream of articles, each one another carefully constructed lie. If they thought I would disappear, they were about to be very disappointed. The Moreaus had always been good at controlling narratives, at making sure the world only saw what they wanted it to see. But this time, they underestimated me. A sharp knock at my door pulled me from my thoughts. My heart jumped before I reminded myself that I was safe, at least for now. I opened the door to find a small, unmarked envelope resting on my doormat. No return address. A chill ran down my spine. I picked it up cautiously, stepping back inside before peeling the flap open. My breath hitched the moment I saw the handwriting. My mother's. The ink had faded slightly, the paper worn at the edges, but there was no mistaking it. "If you're reading this, it means they never let me reach you. I tried, Selene. I tried." My hands shook as I read on. She wrote about the divorce, how Magnus had orchestrated everything to ensure she had nothing, how he had blocked every attempt she made to contact me, spinning the story so that I would believe she had simply walked away, how she had been afraid. The Moreau name is built on lies, Selene. Money laundering, coercion, secrets buried beneath wealth and power. They don't let go of people like us. Be careful. My chest tightened as I reached the last lines. They won't let you go either. The words blurred as a wave of emotion crashed over me. Grief, fury, and something heavier, something colder. I clenched the letter in my hands. I had spent years feeling abandoned, resenting her for leaving, but she hadn't left me. She had been erased. A buzzing sound snapped me out of my thoughts. My phone. I answered without checking the caller ID. "Selene." It was Isolde. Are you okay? I swallowed, my voice barely above a whisper. I got a letter from my mother. A pause. Then, softly, what did it say? I stared down at the pages in my hands, the truth unraveling before me. It said I was never supposed to find out. Hours later, I sat at my desk, the letter beside me, my fingers drumming against the surface. I knew the Moreaus operated in shadows, but my mother's warning confirmed what I had always suspected. There were things happening beneath the surface that were far worse than the world knew. And I needed proof. I reached for my laptop, logging into a secure server I hadn't touched in years. I still had contacts, people who specialized in uncovering the things that powerful families worked so hard to hide. I typed in a name. Celine Moreau. If Magnus and Vespera were planning their next move, Celine would be part of it. And I had a feeling her engagement wasn't the fairy tale she wanted people to believe. It didn't take long. A few messages, a few calls, and then the confirmation came through. Celine's fiancé was drowning in debt. The engagement was a business transaction, not a love story. A carefully crafted power move to secure Celine's position, orchestrated by Vespera herself. I clicked on Celine's latest social media post. True love, built on trust and honesty. My lips curled into a humorless smirk. I copied the files I had been sent, saving them to my encrypted drive. Celine had always thrived on the illusion of perfection. Let's see how she handled the truth. The call from Isolde came just before midnight. "What are you planning to do?" she asked, her voice cautious. I exhaled slowly, my fingers brushing against the letter from my mother. "They took everything from me, Isolde," I murmured. "It's time I take something back." I placed the letter beside the incriminating documents, my resolve hardening. If my mother warned me to be careful, it only meant one thing. I was closer to the truth than they ever wanted me to be. I stared at the names on the documents. Powerful men, untouchable by law, all connected to Moreau Industries. And I had proof. It should have felt like a victory, but I knew better. Because the Moreaus never just defended themselves. They attacked. The first sign came when I stepped into my office. The silence hit me before anything else. My assistant avoided my gaze. Conversations died when I passed. A few colleagues exchanged knowing glances before turning away entirely. I felt it in my gut. Something had shifted. I barely had time to set my bag down before my phone buzzed. An internal message. HR meeting. Immediately. I exhaled slowly, grabbed my notepad, and made my way down the hall. Inside, the head of HR sat stiffly across the table, a folder open in front of her. "There have been concerns about your integrity, Celine." I kept my expression neutral. "Concerns from whom?" She hesitated. That was enough of an answer. "I assume this has nothing to do with my actual performance," I continued, leaning back. "And everything to do with my last name." Her lips pressed into a thin line. "We received allegations that confidential company data was leaked under your credentials. Given the nature of these accusations, we're putting you on immediate leave pending an internal review." A bitter laugh nearly escaped me. Lucian. This had his fingerprints all over it. "You don't actually believe this," I said. The HR director didn't meet my eyes. "I'm sorry, Celine. That told me everything I needed to know." I stormed into Lucian's office without knocking. He was sitting behind his desk, scrolling through his phone, utterly unbothered. "You're trying to erase me," I said, slamming the door shut behind me. Lucian finally looked up, one eyebrow raised. "You erased yourself the moment you decided to turn against this family." I clenched my fists at my sides. "So this is your strategy? Cutting me off wasn't enough? You want to ruin my career too?" He leaned back, smirking. "You don't have a career without us, Celine. You never did." I felt my jaw tighten. "You think I need you?" I asked, voice dangerously even. "You think I won't survive without the Moreau name?" Lucian sighed dramatically. "Celine, let's be honest. You were always the weak link. The moment you stepped out of line, you became disposable." I took a slow, deliberate step forward. If you wanted me to walk away, I said, you should have left me with something to lose. For the first time, a flicker of something crossed Lucian's face. Uncertainty. And that was all I needed. That night, I met Isolde at a quiet corner cafe, the kind of place no one would think to look for me. She slid into the seat across from me, expression wary. What did they do? She asked. I handed her my suspension notice. She read it quickly, then exhaled through her nose. Lucian? I nodded. They think they've won, I said, taking a sip of my coffee. They don't realize I'm just getting started. Isolde studied me for a moment. What's your plan? I pulled out my phone and typed a single message to a journalist contact I hadn't spoken to in years. Then, I turned the screen toward her. A single file attachment, just enough to plant the first seed. Let's see how Lucian handles a taste of his own medicine, I murmured. The next morning, whispers began. Are the Moreaus hiding something? Why is there a discrepancy in their charity funds? Lucian Moreau, next in line for his father's empire, but at what cost? By midday, the first article had dropped. Lucian was already calling, but I ignored it. I smirked as I closed my laptop. Let them think I was weak. It would make my next move all the more devastating. Lucian had always been predictable, arrogant, reckless, and convinced of his own invincibility. That would be his downfall. But Magnus? He was a different beast entirely. When the formal invitation arrived, I wasn't surprised. A sleek envelope, thick cardstock, embossed lettering. Moreau Industries' signature brand of intimidation disguised as sophistication. It was an invitation to meet with him. Magnus Moreau didn't summon people unless it benefited him, which meant he had a problem. And that problem was me. I arrived at headquarters exactly on time. No earlier, no later. If he wanted to play power games, I wasn't going to give him the satisfaction of appearing eager. The assistant led me through the familiar hallways, my heels clicking against polished marble floors. Magnus was waiting in his office, seated behind an expansive desk, fingers steepled together in that calculated way of his. He gestured toward the chair across from him. Sit. I didn't move. I prefer to stand. His mouth barely twitched. Suit yourself. Then, without preamble, he slid a document across the desk. This is my last act of generosity toward you, he said smoothly. I glanced down. A non-disclosure agreement, a financial settlement, enough money to disappear and start over. Silence had a price, and he had just named it. You think you can buy me? I asked, keeping my voice even. Magnus leaned back in his chair, unbothered. I think you can be reasonable. Take the money, Selene. Move on. I picked up the papers, skimming them. The sum was generous, life-changing for most people. But I wasn't most people. You're either with this family, Magnus said, or you're against it. I set the documents down carefully. Then I guess we both know where I stand. For the first time, his mask cracked, just for a fraction of a second. He had expected me to fold, to cut my losses and walk away. He still didn't understand. I wasn't playing their game anymore. I was rewriting the rules. I turned and walked out, leaving the papers untouched on his desk. That night, something felt wrong the moment I reached my apartment door. The lock was intact, no signs of forced entry. But as I stepped inside, the air felt different. Then I noticed it. My belongings had been moved. Not stolen. Shifted. A glass was slightly out of place on the counter. My desk chair had been adjusted. A book I had left on the coffee table was turned the wrong way. Someone had been here. My stomach twisted. My phone buzzed. An unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. Silence. Then a voice. Low, unfamiliar. Stop digging, Miss Moreau, or you'll end up just like her. The line went dead. A chill ran down my spine. This wasn't just about Magnus anymore. I met Isolde in secret, my pulse still pounding from the call. She looked at me, her expression grim. Selene, if they feel threatened enough to do this, you need to leave. I exhaled slowly, gripping the edges of the incriminating documents. Leaving wasn't an option. Not anymore. I locked eyes with Isolde. "No," I said. "I'm going to finish this." The game had changed. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about survival. I had spent years allowing my family to dictate the narrative, to paint me as the burden, the disappointment, the problem. But today, I was rewriting the story. I walked into the Moreau Industries investor meeting uninvited, my heels clicking against the marble floor, my presence drawing immediate attention. Eyes turned toward me, some in shock, others in curiosity. At the head of the room, Magnus sat in his usual seat of power, flanked by Vespera, Lucian, and Celine. His expression didn't change, but I saw the way his fingers curled slightly against the table. He had expected me to disappear. Instead, I had come to destroy him. I strode forward, my movements deliberate, and placed a stack of folders onto the long conference table. "Good morning," I said, my voice carrying through the room. "Before you proceed with today's agenda, I have something for you all." The silence was absolute. I turned to face the investors, some of the most powerful figures in the business world, watching as they reached for the files. Inside, they would find everything: proof of financial fraud, offshore accounts, falsified reports tied directly to Moreau Industries. "For years," I continued, "you've all believed in the illusion of Moreau Industries. Let me show you the truth." I pressed a button on the small remote in my hand. Behind me, a massive screen flickered to life. A series of documents appeared: bank transfers, hidden transactions, numbers that didn't lie. The murmurs started immediately. Whispers, hushed conversations. I saw brows furrow, hands tightening around the pages. Then, Magnus stood abruptly. "Solène," he said, his voice low and controlled. "Enough!" I met his gaze and held it. "You don't get to decide that anymore." The reaction was immediate. Lucian lunged from his chair, knocking several folders from the table. "You think this will change anything?" he hissed, his face contorted with rage. Celine, ever the social strategist, shrank away from the cameras that were already flashing. She knew her own scandal would surface next: her sham marriage, the financial deals behind it. There was no salvaging her public image now. Vespera didn't speak. She remained eerily still, watching me with sharp, calculating eyes. But for the first time, I saw something else in them: a flicker of uncertainty. She had spent her life controlling the Moreau narrative. She hadn't prepared for this. Magnus, however, remained calm. He exhaled slowly, his fingers tapping against the table in quiet rhythm, before he spoke again. "You've made a mistake." His voice sent a chill down my spine. It wasn't a threat. It was a statement, a certainty. I swallowed, but I refused to let him see any hesitation. "No, Father," I said, my voice unwavering. "I finally did something right." The room exploded into chaos. Investors demanded answers. Reporters pushed forward, cameras flashing. The security team hesitated, unsure of who to listen to. Magnus had built his empire on control. I had just set it on fire. And as I turned to the reporters, microphone in hand, I delivered the final blow. "Now tell me, who's the real burden in this family?" The dust hadn't settled yet, but I already knew. Things would never be the same again. The Moreau name had once been untouchable, a legacy of power, wealth, and control. Now it was a scandal, unraveling piece by piece across national headlines. I watched from my apartment as the news played on the screen. The same anchors who once praised Magnus Moreau were now tearing him apart. Moreau Industries in freefall. CEO Magnus Moreau steps down amid financial fraud allegations. Lucian Moreau blacklisted from major business circles. Investors distance themselves. Celine Moreau's wedding canceled after fiancé's financial scandal surfaces. Vespera Moreau, the mastermind behind the Moreau Charitable Foundation. Has she cut a deal? I turned down the volume, leaning back against the couch. I should have felt victorious, but mostly I just felt free. A knock at my door broke the silence. I opened it to find Isolde, holding a bottle of wine in one hand, 2 glasses in the other. She lifted an eyebrow. Celebratory drink? I stepped aside to let her in. More like a farewell toast. We settled into the couch, the city lights flickering beyond my window. Isolde poured the wine, watching me carefully. So, she said, handing me a glass. What now? I exhaled slowly, letting the question sink in. For years, my life had been dictated by my last name, by the expectations, the power struggles, the endless fight to prove my worth. Now, for the first time, there was nothing standing in my way. A slow smile formed on my lips. Now, I said, raising my glass, I live my life. Later that night, I stood on my balcony, gazing at the city below. This time, I wasn't looking for an escape. I wasn't searching for validation or wondering where I fit in. I had walked away, and I had won. The Moreaus would spend years picking up the pieces of their ruined empire, but I wouldn't be around to watch. I had no interest in their downfall, because they didn't matter anymore. I stepped back inside, pausing just before closing the door. The name tag from that night, the one that had called me the family's burden, sat on my desk. For a moment, I considered throwing it away. Then, I smiled. I left it there, untouched. A reminder, because the truth was clear now. I was never the burden. They had always been mine. Before I step away from this story, I want to leave you with something to think about. For years, I believed that family was unbreakable, that no matter how deep the wounds, how cruel the betrayals, there was always a way back. But the truth is, not all families are meant to be held onto. Some are built on love and support. Others, they are built on control, obligation, and fear. Walking away wasn't easy. It took losing everything to realize that I was never the burden. They were. And if you've ever been in a place where you felt like you had to shrink yourself just to be accepted, let me tell you something. You don't owe anyone your silence. Not your parents, not your siblings, not the people who expect you to play a role that makes their life easier while making yours unbearable. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is to step away, to choose yourself. But now I want to hear from you. Have you ever been in a situation where walking away felt like the only way forward? Do you believe that family loyalty should be unconditional? Or do you think there's a point where enough is enough? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And if this story resonated with you, if it made you think or feel something real, drop a 1 in the comments or tell me where you're watching from. And hey, if you want more stories like this, make sure you hit that subscribe button. You won't want to miss what's coming next. Until next time, take care of yourself. You deserve it.